Welcome back, everyone, to Car Ray Rob, where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob, and we want to welcome you to our podcast. Say hello to my little film.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
All right, everybody, I'm super excited because this is the luckiest of Car Ray Rob episodes, our 13th episode.
Well, Rob, I'm not sure if you know this, but actually 13 in many cultures is considered an unlucky number.
What?
Yeah.
In my culture, it is the luckiest of numbers.
Well, I can tell that our cultures are slightly unaligned, so you know what that means.
What?
Culture war.
What?
We're starting a culture war.
Culture war?
Over this, yes.
Oh, God.
Sorry, I knew we would start one sooner or later.
Eventually, it was bound to happen.
Let's just do it, embrace it.
All right, we're gonna push through this culture war, mostly because the 13th episode is my episode.
And that is why it's going to be unlucky, at least for me, hopefully not for the audience, but I'm going to have to brace myself for impact here. Rob, for episode 13, what do you got?
What do you got? What do you got? What do you got?
All right, Ray. Well,
I don't like that laugh at all.
Well, I knew it was our 13th episode, so I knew I had to bring the big guns for the luckiest of episodes.
I like little guns. Little guns. Think about Men in Black. Little guns have been very
No,
successful in film.
Well, but you saw how big of a blast Will Smith's little
That's what I mean.
cricket gun gave in Men in Black. So I'm going to do something very similar here because I have brought something very, very special for this 13th episode. And that is the 1972 black comedy Pink Flamingos by Mr. John Waters.
Well, sorry, Rob, I've seen that. I've seen it many times.
Oh, have you?
So it doesn't fit the rules of the podcast.
Divine is an idol of yours,
you can't
isn't she?
make me watch it because I've already seen it.
Oh, no, sir. You will not wriggle out of this one like that. I have wanted to show you a John Waters movie this entire time, and I went back and forth between a couple of different ones, and I ultimately just decided to go ahead and pull out Pink Flamingos. Female Trouble is another favorite, also part of what is called the Trash Trilogy.
Oh, God.
With Pink
That's
Flamingos
not complimentary.
and Desperate Living. Oh, when you are the Pope of Trash, Mr. John Waters, it is absolutely the highest of compliments. So, yes, we will be watching Pink Flamingos, which stars Divine, constant muse, if you will, for John Waters, along with the rest of the Dreamland team. So, you said, do you know anything about Pink Flamingos?
The animal, I'm an expert. The movie, not so much.
Okay, but okay, let's take this a step beyond. Have you ever seen a John Waters movie before?
I honestly don't think so.
No. Have you ever seen Crybaby with Johnny Depp?
Yeah, I've seen. Oh man, I probably about 30 years ago. I know I've seen parts of it for sure.
Okay, that was the one.
Can't remember. I could piece it all together.
Because it's either that, probably, or maybe Serial Mom. Have you ever seen Serial Mom?
Nope, I don't
Kathleen
think so.
Turner? No, another great movie. Or maybe even, well, the one that probably everybody knows is Hairspray.
Oh yes, yes.
Okay. So you've seen Hairspray?
Yes.
The original with Ricky Lake, or just the new musical?
The new musical.
Okay, all right. Well, he didn't write the new musical. He
Oh,
was
it's
a
not.
consultant.
It's not a direct translation.
It is not a direct translation. It is, but that's kind of Hairspray. Kind of marked a more commercial period in John Waters' career.
Mhm.
Pink Flamingos is not that.
Not commercial.
Not even remotely. It was banned in some countries. It was.
Well, so was actual Hairspray. So the and
okay.
Pink Flamingos probably too. I don't know.
There you go. Fair enough. But like I said, it is a massive cult classic, And so just to kind of like give you a brief little snippet, I don't want to tell you too much because again, this is a movie kind of like The Babysitter, where I think you really just need to jump in with both feet and experience Pink Flamingos. But essentially, Divine is a wanted criminal who's hiding out with her degenerate trailer park family, and her tabloid notoriety is that she is the filthiest person alive.
Oh gosh.
And then a pair of sociopathic type people they want to impress her, and so
They show her a bar of
they want to
soap?
show
I
her
mean,
the
what do you have
true
to
meaning
do?
of the word filth.
Oh.
So it gets bizarre, to say the least. And so yeah, this movie is really gonna, I
Is
pushed
there
you out.
poop in this movie? This sounds like a movie where there could be poop in it.
I am not going to answer that question right now.
Oh gosh.
I am not going to answer that question right now. So I pushed you close to the edge with Blue Velvet. I'm getting ready to kick you right in the butt, right over the side, and we're going to
Okay.
see if you can fly, sir, just like a pink flamingo.
All right, guys. Well, this is where normally we would ask you guys, if you haven't seen Pink Flamingo, to pause the podcast, go watch it. I don't know if I'm recommending you to do that this time, but Rob says we should. So pause the podcast, go watch it, come back, and listen to what I think.
I cannot wait.
Ray and Rob are currently watching the film. You may be also watching the film. If you're not, then you're listening to me say that Ray and Rob are watching the film. They'll be right back when they're done watching the film.
All right, everybody, we're back. And
Rob, you have the gall. You have the audacity. You have the gaudacity.
no making up words.
Pooter pickle. You have the audacity to call me out when I was showing you Lion, because the first hour made you feel a little bad for Saru, and then you're gonna make me watch Pink Flamingos. That's horrible.
Revenge is a dish best served
All right, you
cold.
cranked it up to 11.
Klingon.
You cranked it up to 11. I don't
Klingon
know.
proverb.
Yeah, that was uncalled for. You went way too harsh.
Okay.
That was an overcorrection.
okay. But before you come at me with a knife that you're currently holding right now,
Oh boy.
maybe I should have prefaced, even though I thought I was pretty upfront that this was going to be a difficult movie to watch. But there is a term that is kind of used in regards to Pink Flamingos, and that is agitprop, because it is kind of an agitative propaganda.
Oh, I'm agitated.
Oh, I can tell. And we're going to work through that together. We're going to work through it together.
You've got an uphill battle. There's some heavy lifting that needs to be done.
I feel like what we really need to do is kind of a contextualization of things and kind of
definitely,
and really talk through it. And I think maybe you'll find the gooey center of this sharp as.
There were some gooey centers in this movie that I did not appreciate, and I did not want to find those ever again.
Well, and as I've said, John Waters is a very interesting director for a lot of reasons. And, in this period specifically, it was, this isn't even as experimental as he'd ever been. He was making experimental films in the 60s. And then by this point, when he was really making features, he was still holding on to a lot of that experimentation, but, it was still even more kind of coherent than,
Yeah. There's a thread of a story.
There absolutely
there is definitely plot holes, I think, in timing and stuff.
Sure.
But but I don't even think, I think that's a separate conversation, really.
Definitely.
And I don't think that's even where I would want us to focus on.
Sure.
I think I want to focus on is tell me why. In the words of either the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, I'm not sure which one, but tell me why this was made.
If that laundry detergent commercial isn't lying to me, I'm pretty sure it's the Backstreet Boys. So.
Okay, yes. Greatest cold open in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but yes, involved the song "Tell Me Why." But all right, Rob. So start off. Tell me why.
Well,
Why did I watch this? And why should I appreciate it more than my gut's telling me to right now?
Well, okay, fair enough. And like I said, it's a difficult movie, and that's the point. Is it's supposed to be difficult.
Success.
And I think at this time, when this movie was made, and I'm gonna be straight up, uh, John Waters could have been killed in
Oh, yeah.
certain parts of this
I
country
could see
for
that.
making this movie. I mean,
I'm surprised this was shown in theaters. To be honest with you.
This movie invented the midnight movie. It played in Los Angeles for 10 years.
Months.
Years.
Days?
10 years.
Wow. Only at midnight then, right? Or
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, it invented the midnight movie.
That's
so
cool.
But, to really talk about Pink Flamingos, I think it kind of goes back a little bit to what we had discussed during another difficult episode we had, and that is Blue Velvet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually gonna take a time to read a little bit of an excerpt from a great essay in the book Pope of Trash, which is the companion piece to the John Waters exhibition at the Motion Picture Museum in Los Angeles, the Academy Museum, I should say. And it was written by Janine Bassinger. And I think this kind of puts it a little bit maybe into perspective as to kind of where we should go with this.
Okay.
And so here it goes. Most people picture the world of John Waters as a wild ride down the rabbit hole into a psychedelic scene decorated with cha-cha heels, divine's breasts, beehive hairdos, and dog poop. No, the world of John Waters is Baltimore. It's just Baltimore. He's not the guy who takes us to some place we've never seen or never will see. He's the guy who takes us around the corner in our own neighborhood to show us what we didn't realize was there, or what we've chosen to act as if we didn't know was there. His world is a wild ride, all right, but someone sane is driving.
Okay. I could see some fairness in that.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think there are, for lack of a better term, like I'm just gonna say weird people everywhere. I think that's a safe statement to say. I think, I don't know. I guess where I struggle with is like, all right, let's just talk about representation. Obviously, Divine is drag, right?
Yes, Divine is a drag queen. John Waters was quoted as saying Divine was not trans as
Right.
far as he knew.
Drag, yeah,
Yeah.
drag queen.
Div-
And
Yep.
sorry.
No, you're right. Go.
Okay. So Divine's drag, and I kind of feel like for the time, I don't know if this movie like puts her in a great light. So I guess one thing I struggle with was representation, because I'm like, I don't know. I feel like there's this perception about how disgusting and crude and these types of people, I'm using like air quotes, these types of people are horrible for our society. And then this movie doesn't necessarily unreinforce that per se from that perspective.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit. I mentioned that word agitprop. Maybe we've talked. We usually kind of maybe frame our conversations around a question. So let's even talk about that a little bit. Like, does agitprop work?
Mm-hmm.
In regards to Pink Flamingos and how this movie plays out.
So why do that though? Like, why make Divine so disgusting? Why make her troop so disgusting?
Well, I in doing some reading, for this episode, kind of do some pre-production work. I did kind of seek out some of the more film theory stuff, in regards to Pink Flamingos. And one thing I saw really kind of stood out to me, and that was this idea that Pink Flamingos is a horror movie for religious conservatives.
Okay.
And I think that plays into a lot of John Waters' choices for this movie. Now, granted, that wasn't his quote. That's somebody kind of putting their own thing on the movie. But I don't think they're necessarily wrong either in certain regards.
Well, that could be interesting. Like, this is not like, this is your greatest fears. Here it is, shoved in your face.
Right.
And it's not like it's not like this movie is unbiased, where it's saying only the LGBTQ community is the disgusting people either.
Right.
Because Divine's son is straight,
Right.
and the Connie and Raymond characters are
Right,
straight.
yeah.
So everybody's equally filthy.
Well,
and I guess
absolutely.
that's the point too.
Right, exactly. You know, the hetero couple is forcing women to give birth so that they can
Kidnapped women and
exactly, kidnapped women.
captured and
keeping them in their basements and
chained to the walls.
exactly, and then giving their babies to lesbian couples. You know, kind of maybe through duping essentially, because again, these women don't know where these babies are coming from, as far as you know. So in one regard, you're saying, okay, this lesbian couple wants to have a family and raise a child, and it's the hetero couple is kind of going through these nefarious means to facilitate that.
Right.
So like in that religious conservative view, the hetero couple should have the moral high ground in this, but they don't.
Right. I think they even say in the movie something along the lines of like they don't want the publicity for being worse, but they do want to know that they are worse.
Right, exactly. Well, one of the Mink Stole had some great lines in this movie, and again,
which one's Mink Stole?
She is Connie.
Okay, the character
and
Connie.
Again, a lot of these characters, if you continue on in the world of John Waters, like you'll see them multiple times in different movies. Even once he kind of makes that more Hollywood commercial jump, there's a lot of these people that stick around, which might surprise you from a movie like this.
Well, especially because I feel like the acting is not necessarily the strength of the movie.
Sure. Well, I mean, it kind of, there's, I think, been a resurgence of that even in the last, 20 years or so, especially in the aughts. I felt like there was this, I really hate the term mumblecore. I've always hated the term mumblecore, but it's kind of that thing where, there's certain things that go into that, but one of the things is non-professional actors and actresses. And I think that is one thing, but I think that wasn't even, I think part of that was a choice, for John Waters, but part of it was necessity. This was made in Baltimore. This isn't Hollywood, so he was making Baltimore his Hollywood, and the Dreamlanders were a big part of that. So, I think
that's his crew.
Right. Yes. His cadre of crew and actors and talent, and I'll use the word talent because I know you're dogging them, but there's talent, there is, but it was a community, and I think there was a lot to be said for that, and I think that kind of also gives his work a bit of what's the word? I don't want to say wholesomeness because that's
don't say that.
I don't think John Waters would even approve of that. But again, just that idea of community. There's another great quote from another essay in this book by B. Ruby Rich, kind of about the new queer cinema aspect of John Waters. I'm sure I'll circle back to it later. But there's a great quote about the Dreamlanders, and it's, with his repertory company, the Dreamlanders, Waters from the very beginning had a vision of an alternative world in which no one was an outcast. And I think that's kind of a big part of his movies is, getting these people that, you might see as outcasts in society, and,
definitely,
and giving them a place to go and a community to be a part of. But as going back to Mink Stole, circling back, like I said, she had some really great lines, and there was one that really just always rang true: is there are two kinds of people, my kind of people and assholes. And I think, it's funny too, again, kind of coming from that, hetero couple element. So they're technically the antagonists of the movie, but they always have those moments. They have those moments that you're kind of, you still chuckle, you still kind of laugh.
Definitely, and I will say, because I did mention the light that I think that some of the protagonist characters were kind of shown in, which was, protagonist also is another word that's kind of weird in this movie because there's nobody good in this movie. They're all equally low. I'll say, it's not that I don't get any of it either, though, because I do like, there's a scene that I thought was really good where Divine, she wants to go into town. I don't think she's been in love for 3 days, which was outstanding to her.
I haven't fallen in love for 3 days. It's a great line.
Yeah. So so she's walking down the street as proud as she can be, and people are staring at her as she walks by. But it's just like she's getting the reaction from the people she wants, because she's proud of who she is and what she looks like and what she's doing and stuff. And so like I respect that. I really enjoyed that scene. There's that self-confidence and just be who you are.
Right.
and like then that stuff works for me. But then we're also minutes away from a scene where I'm like, what am I watching? This is horrible.
Sure. And and I mean, to be fair, if it's the scene, I think like Divine isn't necessarily part of that scene.
No, not necessarily.
So
No, it's not
like,
about her. No, I'm thinking about the movie. Yeah, I guess when I made that last statement, I mean the movie in general.
yeah.
But
But yeah, I mean, I think kind of talking about this little portion a bit. There's like a frame where they've got John Waters has Divine framed with the American flag and stuff like that, which I think is kind of an interesting metaphor. Of like, again, these people are here.
oh yeah,
And
they're Americans
they're
too.
Americans too, exactly. And I think that there is that kind of a respect or reverie, I guess, if you will, that John Waters kind of has for these people, because again, like you said, like she is very confident in herself, and I think John Waters. It seems like he is, but who knows? Sometimes when you get to know people, you find out that those people are very insecure for various reasons. I'm not saying one way or the other. I don't know John Waters.
Sure.
I would love to. Please give me a call, John, if you were ever listening to this. But I would totally hang. But I think, and I think that kind of goes back to the idea that John Waters never writes a character that I feel like he looks down upon.
Right.
Like you were kind of talking about the hetero couple and like their depravity, even compared to Divine. And to be fair, I would say for the first part of the movie, their depravity is much higher than Divine's.
Than Divine's.
Right,
yes.
right, exactly. Than Divine. But I think ultimately what he's kind of doing, even through the course of this movie, is he's kind of taking this kind of like moral high ground, moral low ground, and crunching it all into one equal playing field.
Right.
And I think that's part of what he was trying to do with Pink Flamingos.
Yeah. You know what I think is interesting? I think I was talking about this like on a podcast that we did a couple episodes ago when we were talking about Rattle the Brain. Oh, Targets. I'm sorry. Targets, where I was talking about like the violence didn't go far enough. Like in my opinion, like there wasn't the shock value. Like the gun violence was muted, and I didn't think you would do that. Like nowadays, you definitely would go way further. And it's funny because now when I watch this movie, I'm like, you would never go this far. This is this grotesqueness is too far. And so I find it's funny. Like, all right, I'm okay with brains being blown out of your head. I'm okay with this and that. But there's some things in this movie. I'm not okay with watching this.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I'm trying to be pretty open minded. But there,
I begged you. To be fair, I begged
you.
But
but there's some things, So is it fair to talk about some of them though? Because there's some things I just don't think you would be able to do in a movie nowadays.
Oh, I mean, hell yes.
Animal cruelty one, because that chicken died. There was a chicken involved in a sex scene, and that chicken was squashed to death in that sex scene.
Yeah, no,
I mean that is. And I looked it up to double check, and they said yes, that chicken did die.
Well, didn't they? But then they also say they ate it later.
They did eat it, but that doesn't mean its death wasn't torturous.
No, that's fair enough.
But yes, they didn't waste it.
No animals were harmed in the creating of this podcast, but
they were in the movie that we were talking about. You wouldn't do that nowadays. And I felt uncomfortable watching that. And I think, there's no other reason to put that scene in there other than to make you uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And that's part of it. Again,
that's agitated.
That's agitated.
I was excessively agitated while watching that.
Absolutely. And, and I think you can make that argument. Are there scenes that maybe go too far? Sure. And then but with a movie like this, it's just, to be fair, any movie, even with Targets, you just brought up, the idea of watching a movie at the time that it was made.
Sure.
And what it represented at that time, coming out of the 60s, kind of as we know, John Waters kind of grew up in the 50s, post World War II. And, again, kind of a great part of one of the essays I read was talking about, that era and, the idyllic family life, but really, one word that was in there that stuck out to me was the word conformity. And I think that's the idea that John Waters was really railing against. He came up in a Catholic upbringing. I know a lot of the Dreamlanders did.
Sure.
And that kind of thing. And so they were kind of rebelling against that religious upbringing. And it's punk, to kind of boil it down into a really kind of cliche word, but to be fair, like at this time when this movie was made, you know, that kind of in your face punk movement was really rising,
Yeah.
especially, you know, here in the
Well,
States.
I honestly, in regards to that chicken scene, I think, animal cruelty was different back then. Like, if you're making a Western and a horse died in the Western, like, that was it. It didn't matter. Like, there wasn't, like, rules
Right.
where you couldn't do that kind of stuff. Like,
Right.
so that might be the opposite case where maybe it wasn't as shocking back then, but it is now because we wouldn't do
Right.
that to an animal in a movie now.
And that's fair, you know, and then again, it's kind of that idea of like how we've changed as a society over time or whatever. But and I think that's kind of where, you know, I kind of implore people, you know, I implore to you, but I implore to anybody who watches this movie is, yes, like those things are very in your face and they're meant to be, but there is something below the surface of this
Right.
movie that I think is worthwhile and is still true even now.
Yeah, you need something where people walk out of the theater because, like you said, if this aired for 10 years in LA at midnight, it's because people are like, "There's no way they did that in the movie." And people are like, "Yeah, they did," and like, "Well, I don't believe you. Go see it yourself." And then they do, and then that's
Yeah.
why it stays in the theater for so long, because I guess when you break it down, there's probably really only four, 3, 4 things that are like, well, that's too much. That was too much.
Sure.
It's not like it's 2 hours of like we're just trying to top ourselves necessarily.
Right.
There's just a couple things that are just like, we mentioned one, but there's a couple more that are like, this is a lot. This is a lot.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and you can even, you know, kind of, it's funny too because it's this idea of, you know, you touched on it earlier with targets, you know, the idea of like, oh, well, I was kind of shocked that the violence didn't go farther. And, you know, and that's because you and I kind of came up in a time when, you know, it was kind of leading into what we used to call, you know, derogatorily, to be fair, uh, the torture porn era
like Hostel.
of horror. Like, right, exactly.
I remember feeling
like
uncomfortable
Hostel.
watching Hostel the first time.
Exactly.
And I watch it now, you're like, it's not that bad.
Right, exactly. But I think it's funny how a lot of our proclivities always revolve around sex as opposed to violence.
Right.
Now, and I'm not saying that there's no violence in this movie. There absolutely is. But then there's a lot of those parts that are that are sex based, more sexually oriented, and that's where the uncomfortable nature comes in.
Because like there's cannibalism, but it's so it's campy. You're like,
Right.
we don't care.
It's like
this
basically
doesn't
watching
bother
Night of
me.
the Living Dead.
Yeah,
you know,
this
just these people are alive. you know?
This doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Exactly. But and it's it's something to think about because I think that I think John Waters did. Again, somebody sane is driving. As the essay said, and I don't think that there are things that at the time he did he go too far? Sure, you want to say he did, that's fine, but I think there was a reason behind it. Even the more, if you want to call it a straight sex scene, not necessarily like the Ray, bestiality, or I'm sorry, not Ray. What's her son's name? Yeah,
Cracker.
Cracker. Thank you. My mind was just blanking. But the scene between Raymond and Connie, the
hetero couple,
the quote unquote hetero couple, you'll talk about an awkward scene, it's
a lot of toe licking,
right? There's a lot of toe. I love you more than my own. I mean, it's very awkward, and I think that there is a little bit of I don't want to say like poking fun at sex,
sure.
but I think John Waters was definitely, making some tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I think kink goes both ways.
Sure,
and, you're straight, but you're kinky as heck.
Right, exactly, and I think that he was kind of playing with that, but then you kind of it does kind of go into a more extreme when you're talking about their business, and when you kind of meet these women that are in the basement, they actually pick up the hitchhiker,
right,
and bring them down, and they have the scene where they impregnate her and like the other
while she's unconscious,
right? While she's unconscious,
be a turkey baster,
right? And you got the other hostage,
for lack of a better term,
right? And a true term, but it's like doesn't pay to hitchhike these days. I mean, it's just
your own fault,
right? It's kind of like these, it's how you react in the face of this like kind of extreme, I would say violence, because it's sexual violence,
sure,
absolutely, in this scene. So it's interesting, how John Waters, I think, can inject, and that's why he kind of used that word, dark black comedy, in the intro,
Yeah.
because like he
Oh,
finds ways to kind of interject that in even the most uncomfortable of scenes.
yes, he's very successful being uncomfortable, and let's not forget about the butthole, just because I think, we talk about sexuality, again, another scene that, that I think is there to provoke you, because they've show this gaping butthole.
Right.
Performer,
Right.
like this was an act.
It's at a party, to
Right.
give context.
Yep.
It is at a celebration at Divine's
Birthday party.
Right. It's the birthday party at Divine's trailer. And everybody's kind of hanging out, and it's almost kind of turns into like almost like a talent show, like a depraved
there was a
talent
snake,
show.
and there was a female snake dancer.
Yeah.
Or nude woman with a snake on her, and then
Mhm.
the butthole guy came and showed you how he could gape his butthole.
Right.
And but I think I can't believe
talent.
That is talent. That is
talent.
I guess I will say, like, I wasn't shocked or like appalled at that thing, because I really the whole time was distracted. Like, is that can we all do that? Like, you learn that? I didn't.
Well, I'm sure John Waters would tell you to just give it a try.
I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't think about the physics of it, but again, when you talk about shock value, kind of what we're talking about, it's like it is sexually based, I guess, because it involves a butt, and we don't see a lot of buttholes in movies. But it's also it's putting something on screen you've never seen before. Like, we've seen violence, we've seen gun violence, but we've not seen that, or I haven't.
Right.
And so it's interesting to throw that in there and just keep the audience on their toes. You said the movie tries to go lower and lower in some ways in terms of depravity, and I guess that was it. Keep trying to do that.
Well, yeah, and and I think that it's almost like a dare in a way. Like, John Waters is like, "Oh yeah, you think I can't go lower?
Right.
Oh, I can." You can't get more
shocked
filthy?
yet. I will shock you.
We're gonna keep going. But it's there are, I think, again, kind of character. There's one character in this movie. We've talked a lot about kind of like the negative nature of some of these characters, but one character that I actually think is I think almost downright lovable. I'm gonna say it is Edie.
Oh gosh.
I think she is. I think she is very.
That's Divine's
innocent.
mother.
Divine's mother, exactly, who falls in love, true love, with the Eggman.
I don't think so. I think she falls in love with using him for his eggs.
I don't know. That's a cynical view. I think she really loves the Eggman.
There's nothing she showed in this movie that made me think she was capable of doing anything other than eating eggs.
Oh, come on.
She lives in a crib. Or a pen.
That's fair.
You could call it a pen.
You could call it a pen.
She doesn't get dressed.
Yeah.
She's vile.
Come on, just because she eats eggs
and not sloppily.
She
doesn't use forks,
so she doesn't have good table manners. So that makes her vile. God.
Yes, that's a big part of it.
No, again, I'm gonna stand up for Edie in this situation. I think of all the characters in this movie, if there's any one of them that you can definitely, I think, say could even is a good person. I don't want to say that. It's probably too derogatory, but
she would be offended by that,
right? But is Edie, and I think she agrees to marry the Eggman. I think the scene with them together when he comes to her crib is that a Beatles reference? I think I am the Eggman.
I don't know. Is that where it came? Yeah,
I don't
know. What came first?
But I don't think I thought that the first time I watched the movie, but when we were watching it this time, I'm just like, is this a Beatles reference? The Eggman. I almost wanted to go listen to the song again and I want to see some of these lyrics.
I don't even know what he said to her, because all I could see when I was watching that scene was I see the cold breath fog coming out of his mouth. I see some cold breath fog coming out of her mouth. Now that you told me it was filmed in Baltimore, it makes sense that it was really cold out there.
Sure.
And Edie's character only wears basically a bra, so she just looked like she was absolutely freezing to me. And I felt that made me feel almost as uncomfortable as any. I was like, give the dang woman a jacket.
Right.
This is crazy.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of in the same vein. Now, granted, this person is completely depraved, even though I do think you could make an argument in some regards that he is a hostage in and of himself, but there is Channing exactly. Obviously he is the one who impregnates, or is kidnapping and impregnating these women in the basement, but he does eventually run afoul of Ray and Connie, and it almost kind of forces you to feel bad for him. you know, because he's like cosplaying as her.
Right.
There's like he talked kind of about the power dynamics and stuff like that, and kind of that fallout of forced depravity, and you know, ultimately he's fired.
He would probably be the character that I had sympathy toward in the movie.
Really?
Well, because I feel like even the kidnapping, he was probably forced to do that.
I am shocked that I even got you to say that you felt anything for any of these characters in that regard.
There
So you know
go.
what? I take that as a win.
There you go.
Channing, you did
it. And he ends up being castrated to death, so that's not even...
Now, to be fair, he may have deserved that. But, like, again...
I'm not going to say he didn't, but... Yeah.
But again...
And as far as this movie goes, they might have really castrated him just for this, for the shot.
You never know. But like I said, I think it does go back to what I said earlier about the idea that John Waters... I think he genuinely tries to find something that you can connect to in every character, which, you know, from a writing standpoint... is an admirable trait.
That's a goal.
It's a goal, you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what he was playing with, especially with Channing. So we talked, you know, about the party, and then, you know, obviously the police end up raiding it.
They're the ones that get eaten.
They get eaten.
Yeah.
So
we talked about cannibalism in the movie. Yep. The police are the ones that
police
get eaten.
got eaten. So yeah,
you ate them.
You ate them alive.
That's a perfect crime.
Apparently so, especially in Divine's world. But, you know, but the funny thing is, you know, Ray and Connie are the ones that sneak up there. They are the ones who call the cops on them, you know, because they see all of what's going on at this party. You know, it's this interesting tit for tat, which ultimately ends up to, you know, the Divine and Cracker, and then the Marbles, which is Connie and Ray, like having the same idea of going to each other's like houses, homes, and like destroying them.
Yeah, destroying them in some ways.
Right.
So Divine and Cracker spit and lick on everything in Connie and Raymond's house, which then somehow like possesses it in filth. Like their filth possesses the couches and stuff.
Exactly.
Where Connie and Raymond just straight up just burned the Divine's trailer to the ground. And this was another
gross overreaction.
Yeah. And this is another thing where I think you can tell like this is not a Hollywood movie, because like the way this thing burned, it was like this is not a controlled burn. This was not like stunt people or like professionals who planned this burn. They literally just doused this thing in gasoline and lit it on fire. And as Connie like pulled the stick back to throw it in the trailer, like you could tell she like flinches and looks down at her mink jacket because she thought she caught it on fire. Like she was not a professional. I think the stick got like that fire on the stick got way too big, way too quick, and then she tossed it into the trailer. But like this was not professionals. This was just like you said, like a ragtag gang filming a movie, burning something.
Yeah.
I don't think they had a permit to do this.
Definitely,
and
not.
It was
no permit.
It looked cool, but like heck, it did not look safe.
Right. But it's interesting, you know. I'm sitting here thinking about it, you know, kind of analyzing, and I'm gonna. This is probably a weird way to put it, but you know, I think Divine and Cracker would win off of this as the filthiest because they see themselves, their inner, like their excretions, as filthier.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that if they lick everything in the Marbles' house, that will just imbue it with their filth.
Right.
Man, the Marbles just burn the place. It's like, okay, well, like, you know,
pretty straightforward.
That's pretty straightforward. That's pretty pedestrian.
Did Divine know that the couch would become possessed by her filth and kick off the marbles if they sat on it? Did she realize that? Was that part of the plan?
I'm just saying. It's crazy, the power of Divine. But there is kind of, speaking of sex scenes,
before they leave.
Well, to be fair, so there's two things. So the first thing is a oral sex scene between Divine and Cracker, which again is, you know, I mean, for the movie, you know, standards that we would have today, you know, seeing a full frontal fellatio scene in a movie is, you know, pretty much unheard of, you know. So it's not, you know, not that
especially
it's never
mother
happened.
And son.
It's not that it's never happened in an art house film before, but you know, in this, you know, but in this film, you know, obviously you see it, and between, you know, an incestuous mother and son, you know, blowjob scene. But, you know, I'm, you know, past that, you know, once they kind of, you know, get past the friskiness, they do something really great. They save the women in the basement.
Yes, They do. They found him by accident,
Right.
and they let him go. But more to Kurt, Connie, and Raymond, I think, than to save the women. But
Again, pessimistic view, man. Like, again,
well, I
Divine
think
and Cracker
they
knew
were
what
they
was
were
going on.
gonna she was gonna kill him, and then
Ah.
she like waved and thought about it. Like, all right, we'll
Yeah.
let him go.
Again, it's the better parts of Divine that of the character of Divine in this movie that won out in that. They knew what they were doing. And then, as we talked about, Channing ends up in the mix, and they just Cracker and Divine just let them loose on Channing, and
Yeah,
it does not
Channing
go
did
well
not.
for
Yeah,
him.
that's what he said. He ended up castrated, and see you later,
Yep.
Channing.
Yep.
You were he died from the loss of blood or something.
We
But
can only speculate, you know. But then after this is all
after this
done,
is the best part of the movie.
right. Well, then they find both of their homes have been destroyed. You know,
Mhm.
obviously one more to a more final conclusion than the other, considering
Right.
that one's burned to the ground and one's licked a lot. But then Divine captures Connie and Raymond. After that discovery, and they put them on trial.
What do they call it? A kangaroo court trial.
Right.
It's a kangaroo court trial. They're the judges. They're the witnesses. They're the lawyers.
Everything.
Just Divine, Cracker, and Cookie.
But the news show up.
Yeah, they invite the news. They invite some like 3 reporters who basically
They
make
take
it
it
legal
seriously.
by watching it. I
Yeah,
guess.
I think that's what they think, at least.
Yeah.
So they're going with it. But yeah, and they're charging him with first-degree stupidity.
This is the scene where like I think John Walters is like finding himself. Like this, the comedy here works. The comedy is funny. Like this court is funny. The charges that Divine is throwing at Connie Raymond are funny. These 2 scenes or 3 scenes like really work to me. Like they're really funny and like this feels like a real movie again.
It finally hit. It really hits its stride in the last reel.
Yeah. I was like, well, this is going to end on a high note, and then it actually doesn't end on a high note.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And but again, I think John Waters. It's almost like the that one final jump scare.
Yeah.
At the end of a horror movie.
Right.
Again, like it's going back to that what I had said earlier about it kind of being a horror film for religious conservatives. Like it's that last final jump scare.
Yeah.
By the bad guy.
Yeah, because for all intents and purposes, the movie's over. Like
Right.
we made it. I'm like, okay, this is ending on a kind of a high note. Let me think about what I feel about this. And then Divine sees a dog poop. And for all intents and purposes, it looks real, and it looks like she eats it.
Right.
Straight up eats it.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
I'm feeling sick now remembering it.
To be fair, Divine is very upfront. Filth are her politics. Filth is her life.
That is a character in the movie. This is a real woman who ate it, though. I do not like this. Did not look like fake poop to me.
It is supposedly real. I have seen some people. I don't know, but I
think it's real.
I don't disagree.
She's not as good an actress to pull off the look she made on her face when she was like,
right, yeah. But they tar and feather Connie and Ray, and that's
see you later,
that's
Connie and
yeah.
Raymond.
So she ultimately wins, and it's
they're gonna move to Boise,
right, because they have to spread the depravity elsewhere. But I guess for me, it's not hard to see how Divine could become a bit of a cult figure. Even in the extremity of it. I mean, it's like I said, it is a work of pure queer punk cinema.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, and for those, we even see it now. But you think about it then. Coming out of again the kind of the 50s and the 60s, and these small town kids that don't feel like they have anywhere in the world that they would fit in. But in John Waters' world, they would. And I think that there's an importance to that even though this is kind of, again, that kind of work of agitprop where it takes it, maybe too far at times, there's still that underlying idea that, like I said earlier, no one here is an outcast.
Right.
And, I think, again, there's something to be said about it. A movie doesn't play for 10 years, in a city if it doesn't have a following.
I agree. It's hard for me to contextualize right now my response to that because, I agree though, that everybody should have a place, and I think if this movie helps you find that place, that's awesome. Or you're just like, hey, there, people, everybody has their weird things. I have mine, and that this movie can help you reaffirm that that's great. I think the other side of that movie though is like there's a separate agenda that movies can push with acceptance and
Mm,
normalization
sure.
about things. Like things aren't always like the things that like that some types of conservative people I guess are scared of like aren't scary.
Yeah.
And like so like the normalization of that stuff is beneficial too. But I understand that hey, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So there's more than one way to accomplish all these things.
Sure. Well, absolutely. And I think there was another really great kind of portion of this book kind of talks about the intent, like again, kind of in the new queer cinema element aspects of John Waters. One thing about him and when he was coming into his own as a filmmaker, making these shorts in the 60s, like I said, ended up making into his feature films into the 70s. You know, one thing to think about is the Beat generation, the hippie generation. That's 20 years worth of time that people were seemingly becoming more open to new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
In certain regards, especially in kind of like niche culture that kind of grew bigger and bigger over the time. But both of them were really kind of like hetero centered. There were a couple of figures in Beat. I know Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs that were kind of queer
Yeah.
figures in their time. But even through that, that it was really still kind of a very heterosexual time. So there were gay figures that were coming around in experimental film, but you didn't really they were kind of lost,
Mm-hmm.
And I think John Waters kind of helped. He'd be probably more well known than any of those guys now.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So really, he was the one who was able to find that success and make films that were despite being aggressive, because I think you can use that word aggressive.
Definitely.
With something like Pink Flamingos, he was able to connect with people even on such blunt terms. But I mean, I I think John Waters is an important filmmaker for a lot of reasons, and like I said, I think I've read a few different opinions, film theory opinions about Pink Flamingos, and there does seem to be a consensus that this is one of, if not the most important work of queer cinema. But I think again that's contextual very much at the time.
Well, do you think does he take the foot off the gas as his movie catalog progresses, or like
It's
how does he change? Like, or did he learn from this movie to do stuff different? Did he keep it the
Definitely.
same, or
I no. He absolutely learned to do things differently. I think he was able. Again, he was much younger here. Again, when you're
yeah? I'm
young,
not
you're
saying he
in their
has to
face.
learn. I'm
No,
just wondering if he
no.
did.
I completely understand where you're coming from, because it's interesting when you talked earlier about the idea of representation and how it, I guess, acceptance through representation in certain lights is easier than
Right.
others. With this it'd be harder, because again you're kind of looking at it as a confirmation of stereotype as opposed to a breaking of them.
Right.
And but I'm never going to use the word normal when we're talking about John Waters especially, but even
No, not
just,
here.
about people in general, because again it's normality is a bit of a fallacy. But I think as he grew older and he was as his films progressed, he not only kind of softened his, I'm not going to say he softened his edges, he became more strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes to maybe what you're
I guess
saying a
that's
little
where
bit
that probably
more.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe became a little bit more strategic in the way that he wrote and the way that he represented queer people. And because again the Dreamlanders as people stayed with him as long as they could.
Yeah.
Again, some of them all the way through, I think, for the most part. And then there were some that passed away. Unfortunately, Divine died in 1988, which was heartbreaking. But it's I but Divine was in Hairspray. which again,
The original.
right is what right, the original Hairspray. So if anybody, Ray, you said you've seen the remake, the
Right.
John Travolta character in the musical
That's
Hairspray
divine.
is divine. So it's, they all kind of made this leap from, Pink Flamingos
To that.
to Hairspray.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think that there is an idea of acceptance in that. And I think John Waters won in the end. But, if he had never made Pink Flamingos, would that have worked?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you have to kick the door down.
Right.
And I think that's what he was doing.
Sometimes you have to cross the line to see where it's at.
Right. You exactly. So I think John Waters is a great filmmaker in a lot of ways, and I think, I was glad to bring Pink Flamingos, even though it was a bit difficult. But I do think we are getting to the moment everybody's been waiting for.
Oh boy.
So,
that moment.
right? The question remains,
Mm.
do you like this movie and would you recommend it to your mom?
I would not recommend it to anybody in my family necessarily. I'll say, I think when you stock, no, the answer is no. I did not like this movie. There were some scenes I liked, like I said, I thought the trial scene was like, as, it hit everything it wanted to hit. It was,
Yeah.
really, it was well done. It was funny to me. Like that kind of stuff was works. Their over the top acting was perfect for the scene. There's a couple other things. So I was like, again, like, yeah, you're trying to gross me out. I'm not grossed out by this necessarily, but there's a couple things that, like I said, I had difficult time watching. But yeah, I did like the contextualization you said about this conservative horror movie.
Yeah.
When you like putting in that frame, I was like, this movie makes more sense to me now, because really when you think about the movie, or like my initial take leaving the movie was like, it was the movie's not about the storyline. Storyline's very kind of just totally made up, totally just, I'm filthier than you. No, you're not. Get revenge. Be filthy. It's like, okay, whatever. And then there's some scenes that seem random, and they're just there to gross you out. And so to me, like when I literally was, kind of joking around, but asking you, why am I watching this at the beginning of the podcast? I'm like, yeah, why? Make this make sense. And that contextualization did make a little bit of sense to me, that this was more like, if you put it through that frame of reference where this is a horror movie for that conservative outtake. But still, my cup of tea, catch more flies with honey, more about the normalization and acceptance than the absurd, I think, that this movie went for. Lots of different ways to skin a cat. John Walters was probably successive, and if he helped one person by making this movie, God bless him. But
I'm going to venture to say he helped a lot of people.
yeah, I'm just saying. No, I didn't say he only helped one, but said if he only helped one, still be worth it. It would still be worth it, But
Divine is a goddess. I don't care what anybody says.
But to me, Divine is fine. I have no problem with Divine, other than her. We're not going to order the same thing at a restaurant, I don't think. But
different culinary tastes.
Eat the cat poop. I will not, and she probably would. But other than that, I'll say I would avoid this movie in the future. If you told me that there's something else in the trash trilogy that's a couple notches down, would I be against watching it? You could probably twist my arm and force me to. Yeah. And maybe in a couple seasons you will. Well, but
and to be fair, like I said, I went back and forth. Female Trouble is actually, I really love Female Trouble, and that one we may venture down that road together. It's not quite as confrontational as Pink Flamingos, so I definitely, I think there's maybe more of a chance you would like Female Trouble, but I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to challenge you.
You wanted to go all the way.
I wanted to challenge you.
Yeah.
But, just real quick side note, if you ever want to see a movie with Divine playing a straight man, you need to watch a movie called Trouble in Mind. It was directed by Alan Rudolph, and it stars Chris Christopherson, Keith Carradine, and Laurie Singer. It's a very interesting little movie. Yeah, it's kind of a noirish kind of movie, but it's actually really great, and Divine is in it. And I will use he because it is out of drag. He is great in it. And so yeah, anybody out there, Ray included, if you get the chance to check out Trouble in Mind, do it, because again, you kind of see a different side of Divine. But I know you didn't like the movie, but I appreciate you at least, broadening your horizons. I know I kicked you off the cliff this time.
You did.
Like, maybe more so than Blue Velvet.
But you did prep me plenty. Let me know that I was jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Right.
But I think that I still fully support. I'd rather watch a movie like this and know that I've seen it in my life than not have ever seen it or heard about it. To be honest with you, that's how I feel about movies. That's what's great about movies.
Right. Well, that's what I think was great about this podcast too. Again, like I get it. You don't like it. You're not going to watch it again.
It's tough to watch.
It's tough
that's
to watch.
Okay.
I get it. But that's what this is about. It's about finding those movies you connect with, and for you that may not be Pink Flamingos, but somebody out there, hopefully maybe you did. You found a new movie that you enjoyed that you had never seen before. Maybe you were challenged a little bit. Ray was certainly challenged.
Was challenged. Like I said, I found things to like.
Yeah, exactly.
But just not maybe no. I took a piece of the pie, but not the whole thing.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, Ray. Since you didn't like Pink Flamingos,
I did not.
Have you watched anything you have liked recently?
I have.
Oh, good. Okay.
So
at least you got that going for
actually,
you.
I'm new to the party. I finished 2007, the animated Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, it's a great show.
Oh my God, was it a good show?
It's so good.
I watched the live action. I was like, this is okay, but everybody's like saying, and I liked it, but everyone was saying like how it doesn't compare to the cartoon.
The show, not the live action movie, because I've watched neither one. But I've heard the movie is atrocious.
Yeah, I think the movie. Yeah, I think I saw the movie in theaters, which is like why I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm like, well, let me see the cartoon because I somewhat like the show. But then yeah, I see what everybody's complaining about with the live action show. I still think it's okay, but it's like the cartoon is like so good.
Right.
So, but I definitely think season 2 and season 3, like that is easy money for the live action show. If they can't knock that out of the park, then
what are they doing?
What are they doing? Because it was so good. Like it should be easy. So I'm excited to see if the live action show gets a little bit better because of, like I said, I just think the content and source material is so good.
But the question is, are you going to move on to Legends of Korra?
I have already.
Oh, you have already. Okay, because I know there were
I'm
some
gonna have to take some getting into that.
Yeah, that were kind of like on the fence. Like I know it was kind of divisive for some like Avatar fans. I actually think it's really good. I'm not saying it's as good.
Yeah,
but I really enjoyed the kind of like almost steampunk element.
Yeah, I have to wrap my head around that because it feels like, I mean, it is like, I'm guessing like 80 years in the future or some,
Yeah, it's
like, but it's like, all right, now there's cars and radios and none of that stuff seemed even close to being around. Easily could. I mean, they have people that can, shoot fire out of their hands. I think they can invent a combustible engine, but still. But so I'm gonna wrap my head around it. But I've liked the first couple episodes I've seen so far. I'm gonna give it a shot.
Yeah, it's a grower. It's a grower.
What about you? What have you watched?
I've watched a couple of things. Well, funny enough, first off, because we watched Lion on our last episode, it really, I enjoyed Dev Patel, and I realized that his new movie Monkey Man is streaming. And so I I'm going to check that out. And he directed it. I didn't realize that at the time. He directed it. I think he wrote it. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I think it's a passion project.
Yeah, and it was really good. I actually really enjoyed it. Like my only reservation going in is I know it was produced by the same guys that did John Wick.
Yeah,
and like from the trailer, I'm like,
it might be a John Wick rip off.
Yeah, that was my only concern. I'm like, I don't know if I care enough about like, oh, this is just John Wick in India. Like, I don't know if I care, but it wasn't that. It was so much more. So I actually really highly recommend that, especially if you like Dev Patel, which I know you do from Lion. I thought the action sequences were great. They were almost more realistic than John Wick. Like John Wick is so highly choreographed.
Produced,
I mean, and it had moments of that, but it felt a little more visceral, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I think I've seen some things about the making of Monkey Man where it's like, make it up on the day. We have no budget. Let's figure out how to get this to work in camera. And so
definitely.
I think that definitely. I'm glad that visceral element showed up.
Yeah, and it does. It does. But it doesn't feel cheap.
Right.
With like a lower, like if it didn't have the budget of John Wick, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
I will say that. The other thing, speaking of, budgets and high budgets or budget issues, I watched Furiosa, which, I am, I love Mad Max, all the Mad Maxes, but obviously I did love Fury Road.
Right. I'm indifferent on the trilogy.
Sure. And, I think for me, I loved Furiosa. Just long story short, I loved Furiosa. But I actually think you should watch Furiosa because I think it'll make you like Fury Road more. Like it kind of gives some really great backstory to the world building that they did
Just kind
in
of drove
Fury
through
Road.
in Fury Road. Like there wasn't a
Right.
lot of. It was
Right.
action movie,
Right. You kind of just had to
start to
go with
finish.
it. And there's still some of that,
Sure.
where even in Furiosa where you just kind of have to go with it. But I think, I'd recommend sit down, watch Furiosa, and then watch Fury Road. And I think you'll appreciate Fury Road maybe more than you did that
I might
initial
just do
watch.
that.
But yeah.
Well, Rob, I think I feel like in the Neverending Story, the horse Artax, is it that sinks in the mud?
Yeah.
That's what I felt
Wasn't
like.
it Trey? No,
Trey's horse, Artax was the
right.
horse.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
I was that horse.
You were that
I was
horse?
sinking in the mud,
Was that
and nobody would get me out.
I wouldn't. I was trying to pull you out.
You
I'm
got
Atreyu in it.
close, but you were too. It was too sad to get me out. I don't know, but the only way I could get out of this mud is if we get some people to review, like, and subscribe to this podcast. I think that would get me out. I think that would work. That would lift my spirits up, and I'd be able to get out of the mud. So please, listeners, like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review if you can. If you do, we will read it out loud.
And you know what else would probably help Ray get out of the mud is if you could leave a comment of a movie that Ray could watch instead of Pink Flamingos, because
Please have it be uplifting.
he was never going to watch that movie again. But he might not be the only one. Somebody else might be looking for a movie to watch. We would love to be able to see that. We will be back in 2 weeks, and it will be Ray's episode,
and it will be better uplifting, better at uplifting you than this one.
This is gonna be revenge, huh?
No, I'm gonna do one you like just to spite you now. I'm gonna see what you showed me with Pink Flamingo, but I'm showing you this.
Ray's gonna take the high ground.
I'm gonna take the high ground.
When they go low, we go lower. Oh no, that's not what we're doing. But you don't want to miss whatever it is Ray recommends.
Yep, you're not gonna want to miss it. It'll be great.
It'll be great. But until then, this is Car Ray Rob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And remember, be defined by the films you love, not the ones you hate.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
All right, everybody. For episode 14, I am calling an audible. I had a movie selected that I think Rob would have absolutely loved. It's a treasure. I'm not picking that movie for my next movie. Episode 14, in fact, is going to be the 2018 movie Beautiful Boy, starring Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet. I love this movie. It's a bit of a chore to watch it sometimes, but I think it's a movie that gives me the feels, and I think it's going to give Rob some feels too, but maybe not the ones he likes. So I'm going to make him watch that in response to this Pink Flamingo fiasco. So join us in 2 weeks. Watch Beautiful Boy leading into that podcast.